Aircraft carrier is on a mission for months with about 5,000 sailors on board.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is very vulnerable, and therefore there's a high probability of someone dying on board.
Oh.
Sad, man.
The famous flight deck where planes take off and land is also used for funeral ceremonies when someone dies on board. What happens when someone dies in the middle of the sea, and why is the burial carried out at sea and not on land?
It's a good question.
There is a standard procedure for a disposition at sea. Everyone attending the funeral must be appropriately dressed in the uniform of the day. The adjutant, also known as the officer of the deck, announces, "All hands bury the dead," to the members of the ship. If possible, the ship is brought to a stop. All colors of flags aboard the ship are then brought to half-mast. The casket bearers, the firing party, and the bugler come on deck, and they're joined by other crew members. The casket bearers consist of 6 to 8 crew members, depending on the combined weight of the deceased and the casket. The casket bearers will be on both sides of the coffin and line up in order of height. The deceased may or may not be qualified to have a burial at sea. For the dead to be buried at sea, the deceased must be a uniformed officer on active duty. The deceased can also be a retired Navy sailor or an honorably discharged veteran. Burials at sea have been a long-standing tradition of the Navy. It's been in existence almost as long as sailors have ventured into the seas.
What's your thoughts on the burials at sea? Obviously, as we're used to burials on land, it's the norm of the world. Do you think doing it on sea is the right way to do it in their situation, or do you think it would have been better to have it on land where they can be transported onto land?
It's tradition, isn't it? I think it's a case where because they're fighting on sea and they have died whilst being on sea, so that's probably why they bury them in the sea.
And they are Navy SEALs at the end of the day. They're on the sea
Yeah.
a lot, right? Or Navy sailors, yeah.
And
true.
maybe it's a case where they probably have this discussion beforehand, but then also what happens to family members?
Exactly, because the casket is getting put into the water from what I saw.
Yeah.
So how do they get visited? I'm guessing they'll probably have a memorial place for that person, but the body's not going to be buried there.
No.
For the first burials at sea, the deceased was usually sewn into a sailcloth before the body would be sent overboard. There were also religious ceremonies, according to the faith of the deceased.
That's nice.
Nowadays, the deceased is placed in a coffin. The ceremony can take many forms. The deceased might be sewn into a sailcloth the old-fashioned way, in a casket, in an urn, or their cremated remains might be spread in the sea. Sometimes the cremains of the body might be mixed to form a block. This concrete block is then dropped into the sea to form a man-made reef.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
The ceremony is conducted with military honors, including a rifle salute and the playing of taps. The exact details of the ceremony may vary depending on the individual's rank, service history, and personal wishes. The process of burying a dead U.S. Navy sailor at sea involves several steps and is a solemn and dignified ceremony that is carried out with the utmost respect for the deceased. First, the body of the deceased sailor is prepared for burial at sea by being placed in a weighted canvas shroud. The shroud is tied with a line and secured with a piece of canvas or burlap. Once the body is prepared, a burial at sea ceremony is held on the deck of the ship. This ceremony typically includes a chaplain who leads the crew in prayers and readings, as well as a rifle party who performs a 3-volley salute. A 3-volley salute, also known as a rifle salute, is a traditional military honor given to fallen sailors and veterans during funeral and memorial ceremonies. The 3 volleys are fired by a rifle party consisting of 7 members, who are typically members of the honor guard or members of the deceased's unit. The process of a 3-volley salute begins with the rifle party forming a line and facing the casket or burial site. The party consists of a rifleman, who is the leader of the party and is responsible for giving commands, and 6 other riflemen who serve as the firing squad. The rifleman then gives the command to present arms, and the riflemen raise their rifles to the present position, which is a position in which the rifle is held at a 45-degree angle with the barrel pointing upwards.
What I will say is very well thought out. It's very well organized, and there's a lot of respect behind it. It's not just kind of, people are there, say your words, and they put the body. There's a procedure, and it's very honorable. So I could see why they would like to go down this route, because it's honorable.
End of the day, you're giving yourself to protect your country. You're already knowing in the back of your mind you might potentially die. There's a 50% chance that you will die.
Yeah, maybe even more.
So there's going to be a lot of honor while, they're burying their fellow, soldiers.
Sailors,
Yeah,
in this case.
Next, the rifleman gives the command to ready, aim, and the riflemen adjust their aim so that their rifles are pointed towards the sky. Finally, the rifleman gives the command to fire, and the riflemen fire 3 volleys in unison. After the 3 volleys have been fired, the rifleman gives the command to order arms, and the riflemen lower their rifles to their sides. The rifle party then exits the ceremony, and the funeral or memorial continues. The 3 volley salute is a solemn and respectful way of honoring fallen sailors and veterans during funeral and memorial ceremonies. It's a tradition that has been carried out by the U.S. military for many years and is a way of showing respect for the deceased and their service to their country. After the ceremony, the body is transported to the ship's fantail, where it's placed on a canvas litter and slid into the sea. As the body enters the water, the ship's crew members salute, and the ship's bell is rung. The body is then allowed to sink to the bottom of the ocean. In a scenario where the deceased has to be taken to land while the aircraft carrier is on deployment, the body is placed in a body bag and stored in a freezer known to sailors as a reefer. This storing procedure is to preserve the body until the deceased can be transferred to a morgue. Unless the vessel is at war or engaged in a battle, the deceased can be purse-transed to a medical examiner in a couple of days. Otherwise, the body might be preserved for weeks, sometimes months. However, if there's no request to deliver the body to land, the sailor is buried at sea. Sometimes, burial at sea may also include the scattering of the deceased ashes. In this case, the ashes are placed in a biodegradable urn and scattered into the water. It is not customary to burn the bodies of deceased U.S. Navy sailors on an aircraft carrier.
If you had a choice, and you was a Navy sailor, what would you choose out of those? If they gave you the options?
I want to be in the casket.
You want to be in the casket, but
Yeah.
what, in land, or would you do the on?
I mean, it's tradition to be in the sea, isn't it?
So would you do that way?
But then I guess, family must be mentally prepared.
Yeah.
That he'll be buried in the sea, and I don't even think family are allowed to come.
Yeah. No, because they're on deployment, so the family won't be there. But also the family. Comment below, guys, on this one. Certainly, they've got to do like a memorial place for this person who's passed away. It's not like, oh, you got nothing. You'll have like a they've got to. They can't just leave absolutely nothing for the family to not even have a place to mourn.
Yeah.
So let us know, guys. But my common sense says they got to. I'll be shocked.
If I had the choice, I'll be in the casket in the land.
What bugs me about that, though, is how they said you can be frozen for weeks, even up to a month. I wouldn't want my body to be frozen for that long. I would rather the land, but obviously you don't know, but if you're getting told you're going to be potentially up to a month, and that's if I'm frozen for like a couple of days, that's fine. But weeks, I feel a bit funny about that.
Yeah.
The U.S. military does not have a practice of cremating the bodies of fallen service members. Instead, deceased U.S. Navy sailors are typically buried at sea or transported back to land for burial in a cemetery. If a sailor dies on an aircraft carrier, their body would typically be prepared for burial at sea in a weighted canvas shroud. A burial at sea ceremony would then be held on the deck of the ship, followed by the sailor's body being transported to the ship's fantail and slid into the ocean. In some cases, the deceased body may be transported back to land for burial in a cemetery. In this case, the body would be placed in a casket and transported by plane or ship to the chosen cemetery. A funeral service would then be held at the cemetery, followed by the burial of the sailor's body in a grave. The process of burying a U.S. Navy sailor on land is similar to the process of burying a civilian. This service typically includes prayers, readings, and music, as well as a eulogy or other remarks about the deceased. The service may also include a military honor guard who performs a rifle salute and presents a folded American flag to the deceased family. After the funeral service, the deceased sailor's body is transported to the cemetery for burial. Overall, the process of burying a U.S. Navy sailor on land involves several steps and is a solemn and respectful ceremony that honors the life and service of the deceased.
Very sad.
It's a tradition that has been carried out by the U.S. Navy for many years and will continue to be a part of the Navy's history and heritage.